Welcome to the ClassicalU podcast. ClassicalU is a training platform with over 100 self-paced online courses and new content added regularly. We customize and brand learning pathways, serving schools, as well as offering individual subscriptions to parents, teachers, and school leaders. Visit ClassicalU.com to learn more. I'm the director, Jesse Hake. On this show, I interview our course presenters as well as authors and leaders in classical education, talking about running a great classroom, teaching the human and fine arts, the great books. We're delighted to have you listening. Thank you for joining us. Our guest for this episode is Russ Gregg, co-founder and head of school at Hope Academy since 2000, and now serving as the visionary president and co-founder of the Spreading Hope Network. It is so great to have you joining me today, Russ. Thank you. You have a course with us at ClassicalU that was one of the early courses released with us going on a decade ago now. It is just a privilege to have you as one of the senior leaders in the classical renewal, and I am honored to talk to you about the renewal more broadly, as well as your own work, and also to look specifically at the course that you recorded with us and to hear what you would add, how you would articulate things now, as you shared on key topics there related to reaching all people with the Christian liberal arts tradition of education and how that is a gift to all of us.
My pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks so much. I would love to start with a question about where you are. You've shared some big announcements with exciting transitions, a new head of school coming in at Hope Academy. And what would you like to share as far as what's next for you and what your focus is in serving the renewal in this next stage?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but this is actually year 25 in the the life of Hope Academy, the school we started in the inner city of Minneapolis in 2000. And over the years, surprising to me is that Hope Academy has become more and more of a national model for people. And so 6 years ago, we started an adjunct organization called the Spreading Hope Network to come alongside people that wanted to replicate that model in other cities around the country. And the explosion and growth of that Spreading Hope work has captured my interest in that. And so this year we announced that we're going to be transitioning the leadership of Hope Academy to Kelvin Sims. And then I will be, over the next year, more and more working with the Spreading Hope Network to help other leaders who are raised up to start classical Christian schools, particularly in among the urban poor.
That's exciting. So shifting your focus to the renewal in the country and the world even. And we were just chatting a little bit before we hit the record button here about an inflection point, I think is the term you used. What are some of the factors going into the spread and the growth that we're seeing in the classical renewal that you're observing, and what kinds of opportunities and challenges how would you articulate those?
Yeah. You know what? When we started 6 years ago, when we started the Spreading Hope Network, we, in our wildest dreams, we thought maybe we could help one new school start a year, and we thought maybe we could then start 10 schools in 10 years. And instead, what we saw was 20 new schools start in 5 years.
Wow!
So this is obviously on the heart of God, that God's concern for the urban poor, that they too are people created in the image of God, that they too are deserving of the best Christian education that there is. It has that there's kind of a current of God's in zeal for the urban poor that we've entered into it, and so we've seen, like I said, double the number of schools in half the number of years.
Wow.
And then the thing that I think that's been acting as a catalyst in the last few years has been this growth of school choice in 10 to 12 states around the country, where legislators have said, you know, what's really important is that every child has access to a great school, and they're becoming kind of agnostic about the school, and there's instead saying let's give the money to the parent and let the parent choose the school that they believe is best for their child. Well, that's, you know, so at Hope Academy in Minneapolis, you know, we were having to raise, you know, $10,000 to $12,000 a student.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, now students are bringing that amount of money with them to the schools, and so
that's a game changer.
So the opportunity to start new schools, particularly among those where that would typically not have access to that kind of education, is unlike any time in our history. Wow. It's a really a moment, a Kairos moment that is unlike anything that I've seen.
So this brings responsibility and a lot of challenge, as well as opportunity. What are some of the top kind of weak points that you see as folks serving in the renewal need to step up to the plate together here?
Yes, I think the two things that we're most focused on is identifying people that see this opportunity and are willing to trust the Lord and move ahead and do something. I've often used the word crazy, Jesse. Something that typically is beyond explanation. That when 25 years ago, when I stepped out of my job to start Hope Academy, my boss said, "That's crazy that you would do this." And so, but there's now a movement of crazy people, of people that God is giving faith to trust Him, to start schools in places where there aren't classical Christian schools currently. Yeah. And so, how do you bring the best education there is to those who need it the most? And so, we're looking, particularly for those folks, but then in almost every case, among the 22 new schools that have started in those kinds of situations, there's also a second kind of leader that's been necessary. And I've started to call that person a gospel patron. That somebody who's got connections with the philanthropic community in a city, and that can help to network those people and bring them on board. And so we're, in some sense, what we're looking for are founders and funders, but it's a key leader really in both those areas. That within any city, there's a person that will step up and step forward and say, I will trust God and start such a school. And then there's a gospel patron who's saying, I want to be a part of this, and I'll come alongside and lead the philanthropic effort.
Yeah, thank you. So in these schools, in American cities or cities around the world, you obviously will have diversity, in a variety of ways. How do you think of the need for income diversity? So you've spoken, of the urban poor. What do you think schools should aim for as far as serving a variety of, family income levels? Is that a positive, or do you tend to think that models are more effective, kind of one way or the other?
Yeah. Well, I've found that turning to what Jesus had to say about this has been a faithful guide in that. And so one of the ways I like to conceive of the classical Christian school renewal is that day by day we are spreading a banquet of the richest liberal arts, Christ-centered education that you could have anywhere in the world. We're spreading a banquet of that
Mm-hmm.
kind of education for our children.
Mm-hmm.
And remember what Jesus said about giving a banquet? He says, when you do so, the tendency is to invite your friends and neighbors and
Mm-hmm.
relatives who will pay you back.
Yeah.
He says, but if you want real joy, he said, if you want treasure, real treasure, he says,
Mm-hmm.
think about those that would never, ever in their wildest dreams imagine there was a seat at the table for them. He
Mm-hmm.
said, for instance, the poor, the lame, the broken, the blind. He says, now those
Mm-hmm.
people know that they're not, there's no place at the table for them. But he said,
Yeah.
if you want real joy, he says, think about those that aren't at the table and go and make a place for them. And that's really what Hope Academy and the Spreading Hope work has been all about, is
Mm-hmm.
making a place for them. And my experience, Jesse, is that kind of diversity,
Mm-hmm.
of culture and socioeconomic background
Mm-hmm.
has been the most enriching experience of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say, in some senses, every day we're living Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. Remember in his speech, he said, I have a dream that
Mm-hmm.
that there would be this kind of school
Mm-hmm.
that my kids could be a part of. And
Yeah.
there's a sense every morning, Jesse, that we're living that dream. And one of the ways I like to put it is that what we're having is a little taste of heaven. I
Yeah.
mean, remember in Romans 7, right? It says that heaven, that there will be people from every tongue and tribe and people and nation gathered together around the throne of the Lamb. And so when we pray, almost on a daily basis, right? Thy kingdom come, thy
Mm-hmm.
will be done on earth as in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then that should be a part of what we're praying for and working towards, is that there would be a gathering of people from every tongue and tribe and people and nation, together around the throne of the Lamb. And these new classical Christian schools in urban settings are actually a little taste of heaven.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the dream of the kingdom is something that we taste when we're serving in these ways, in these settings. Um, I share a little bit of this experience with Logos Academy. I think you're familiar with them in York, Pennsylvania,
Yes.
where I served for a few years, and very similar kind of vision and mission, and it's absolutely true. Experientially, what you're saying, that taste of heaven, taste of the kingdom of God, is such a beautiful thing. Um,
What one thing that comes to mind about that is, one thing that C.S. Lewis once said is that he had two friends, and he would meet with them together, and one of the friends passed away,
mm-hmm,
and he thought, well, that might mean that I'll even have a deeper, richer relationship with the one remaining. And he said, actually, it worked the other way. Is that
mm-hmm,
it was richer when there were the three of them
mm-hmm,
than there
mm-hmm.
was with just the two of them,
Yeah,
because the third person brought out things in the other that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And the same is true about God's gift of culture.
mm-hmm,
Right? That the culture is not man's idea, right?
yeah,
Culture is God's idea. And
yeah,
what was his purpose of it? Its ultimate purpose is that we might know and enjoy a richer experience of God
yeah,
than we
yeah,
otherwise would have if we just experienced him in our own, in a single culture.
yeah,
And so there are dimensions of knowing God and appreciating God and loving God that have come to me by being in a community of Latinos and a community of Ethiopians and
mm-hmm,
a community of
mm-hmm.
Somalians than would have otherwise happened if I didn't have that kind of richness.
Yeah, leave it to C.S. Lewis to to be able to articulate that. Is that the same passage, I think, where it leads ultimately to this circle of people around God, and as they all gaze upon God and learn to see God's beauty and love better and better, he says, like in their peripheral vision, um, seeing the face of other people gazing upon God helps you to see God better.
You got it.
I think
You got it.
that's the culmination of the passage you're describing. Yeah, that's an astonishing portrayal of the beatific vision in community, right? Yeah, thank you. The so how do we there's been a lot of discussion in the renewal over the years about things like canon and and questions surrounding diversity and what are some of the key ways kind of practically to create a seat at the table, as we have so many barriers in our kind of current cultural and political environment that can kind of create they're false obstacles, but they feel like obstacles to us. What are some of the ways to clear the seats at the table and allow folks to be welcome? What insights have you gained, over 2 decades of serving?
Yeah. I think the most important factor in creating that kind of a rich community is humility. That there's a humility that flows from the gospel, right? That if in the end we're loved not because of our merits and righteousness, but in spite of our demerits and unrighteousness, it creates a kind of gospel humility, doesn't it? That there's nobody who can say, well, my way of doing things is always best and always better, and that what you should do is do things my way. But it creates the kind of gospel humility that that helps us to see that God is at work in others. Another thing that's a part of that is common grace. I think is that seeing that God is at work in all cultural expressions to some degree, and when his gospel comes to them,
Yeah.
right, it takes those things that he's already placed in that culture and brings them to a fuller redemptive fruit that becomes for the benefit of the entire kingdom of God's people. But I think without that humility, what we'll basically have is one dominant group making all the rules and policies and ways of doing things, and then others are asked to submit to that one group, and that's really missing out on what God had in mind. And so there's got to be gospel humility. I think the second thing is gospel forgiveness. That I don't think there's a more difficult thing than the challenges of that different culture groups living and working and learning together, right? Have and particularly if there's a background of sin that which we have in our country that almost sets us up for failure.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, you've got gospel humility, and on the other, you have this beauty of gospel forgiveness, that we can forgive one another as God in Christ has forgiven us. And oh my goodness, when you have both of those things going on together, it produces what we've used at Hope Academy for decades is cultural harmony, or kingdom harmony. Right? It's not making everything the same.
Yeah.
Right? It's something more beautiful than that.
Yeah.
it's
harmony.
It's like when you hear a choir sing, all of a sudden go into harmony, and you hear the different parts, and you go, "Oh my!" That's right. Or like, why is it that we love when we why do we love trying different kinds of ethnic foods, right? We love to go out and have right? Italian and Chinese and Tex-Mex and that because there's a kind of richness there, right? And so yeah, I think those two things have been key to us is gospel humility and gospel forgiveness. And then how might that translate into like if we're reading the great books, right,
Right, right.
into the canon? I think it would allow you to at least consider that because of common grace, there would be people of other cultural backgrounds that have written about the entered into the great conversation, right? Have written about key themes
Yeah,
of justice and
yeah.
identity, different things that the great books push us to wrestle with. Um, that people all over the world have wrestled with some of those questions, and so we can look at those, and so it does have a tendency to broaden the the writers that we're willing to engage
Mhm.
with in this conversation.
Yeah, and to kind of consider the canon as leading up into a living canon that
Mm,
that we're continuing to develop together in some sense.
that's good.
Yeah. I know Dr. Angel Parham is someone you're familiar with, and an author, with Classical Academic Press and a professor now at University of Virginia. I think she speaks quite a bit, and I find it very helpful about the diversity that does exist within the Western tradition, that we think of that because of all the kind of polemics surrounding the topic now. We think of it as somehow uniform and monochrome, and but it's actually always been diverse. It's always, Homer refers to the Ethiopians in very, very exalted language as the people that the gods go to be with when the gods need uh, you know to enjoy something good and beautiful. It's just sort of counterintuitive to us, how diverse and rich our own tradition is, all the way through, into its roots and the cultural crossroads. I think she uses that language around the Mediterranean. Do you find some of that, or other, other ways of talking about, our tradition and the Christian liberal arts tradition? Uh, do you find that helpful, or what are some other kind of talking points
I do find
for
that helpful.
engaging folks? Yeah.
It feels like a recovery of something
Hmm.
that was lost, right?
Yeah.
Or at least that I've been blind to. And so I
Hmm.
really appreciate people like Dr. Parham who are helping us to recover and understand the richness that once was, which is really the whole classical experiment, isn't it?
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's it's realizing there was something in the past that we've lost, tools of
Hmm.
learning that, and that we
Hmm.
need to dig in and recover. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's I think the recovery is going to look different, isn't it? It's not
Hmm.
going to be
Hmm.
just doing what they did, thousands of years ago. Is that
Yeah.
it's going to have to adapt to our current context.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's great confidence that the thing that we're contextualizing or adapting to the current context is the real thing, and
Hmm.
it is
Hmm.
the thing that's needed. But
Yeah.
it can't just speak to the issues that were true thousands of years ago. It's got to be something that's going to fit for our current context.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. The great truths of the past, the great experiences of the past, continue to inform and help in the needs and demands of the moment. One of the things you addressed in the course that you recorded with us many years ago, um, in a lesson called "A Liberating Education for All Children," lesson 6 in that course, you differentiated between two conceptions of liberty, a negative and a positive liberty. I found that really helpful. What over the years, as you've used that idea of negative and positive liberty, and talking about the Christian liberal arts tradition, what are what are some of the key insights there, and how would you articulate them now? Does that continue to be a helpful paradigm? Um,
It most certainly does, because
hmm
I think the current conception of liberty that's been at least on hold for 3 or 4 decades now is that liberty is freedom from
hmm
anybody telling you any to do anything. It's a libertarian
Right.
vision of liberty,
Yeah.
and that vision leads to license. It
hmm
in um, but again, the classical view
Yeah.
of where we got the idea of liberal arts was that, well, actually, right, the idea is that a person who lives under the idea of freedom from is actually a slave
hmm
in a
hmm
certain way,
Yeah.
right? A
Yeah.
slave to their passions, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing in our day, aren't we? Is most people are, they're not politically enslaved, but they're almost culturally enslaved,
Yeah. To our
aren't they?
appetites, consumption, entertainment. Yeah.
Particularly, exactly.
Yeah.
And that what a liberal arts education does is it equips someone then to enter into the new idea of freedom for, right?
Freedom for.
And that's the beautiful thing, that Christ has set us free, not to indulge our lives in sin, but to indulge love for others,
Mm.
right? It's
hmm
holiness and love for others, and so it's a freedom for. And I was just looking at something the other day. I think we're getting close to the 250th anniversary of is it the Constitution? And
Sounds
again,
about right.
you've got this American experiment, and the
Yeah.
founders, right, knew that a democratic form of government where you entrust the governing to the people required a virtuous and moral people to govern
Yeah. The
themselves,
formation of the liberal arts and
and
the
that
Christian
they
faith.
knew
Yeah.
that the liberal arts were absolutely key to forming a citizenry that could handle democracy. And so you remember that story when Benjamin Franklin was coming out of Constitution Hall, and they shouted, "So, Doctor, do we have a republic?" He says, "We do, if you can keep it."
hmm
And
hmm
his right, that he knew that it would take great work to develop a citizenry who could handle the responsibility of self-government. And I would say we've lost that, uh, but the renewal is regaining that, right? Is that in a democracy, every citizen should be educated like a prince, not a pauper,
hmm
because right, they're the
Yeah.
rulers and the governors.
Because they have to take charge of themselves, right? And that freedom for the pursuing good and beauty in their own life is a heavy responsibility.
So we're really raising up a countercultural tribe,
Yeah.
aren't we?
Yeah.
Of people that would view freedom in God's intended ways, a freedom for.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a counterintuitive concept, I think, in our contemporary world, because we tend very much toward that libertarian, definition of freedom, and I just find that helpful to kind of reset. Another point that you brought up in the course is cultural competency um, in a lesson 4, and I think when I asked you the question earlier in this conversation about kind of how do you help to set the table, create seats at the table, you went to humility and forgiveness. Um, what are some um, when you talk about cultural competency, what are some of the resources you might point to, or is that still a category or concept that you find helpful?
It is. Um, when we're looking to hire staff, we've often used Patrick Lencioni's concept of the ideal team player,
Mm-hmm.
and he looks at three uh, key characteristics. He says humble, hungry, and smart. And that
Mm-hmm.
smart he talks about is really like emotionally smart, uh, and
Yeah.
and so we sort of tag onto that, culturally smart or
Mm-hmm.
competent,
Mm-hmm.
but humble, hungry, and then high EQ and cultural competency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think one of the best ways, Jesse, of developing that kind of cultural competency is through reading. Right? There's
Mm-hmm.
there's reading a
Yeah.
diverse group of authors. You are able through reading, right, to enter into the
Yeah.
experience of somebody, particularly somebody who's very different
Yeah.
than yourself,
Yeah.
and it creates a kind of empathy and
Mm-hmm.
depth of understanding. But I think that the second thing is that it's developed through conversation.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and so one of the things that we do at Hope Academy is that once a month we have a time that we call it our cultural harmony gathering,
Hmm.
and the main things that happens in that thing is opportunities to hear one another's stories. And when you're in a diverse community, oh, well, you I just have learned so much uh,
Mm-hmm.
about other cultural understandings, and that by listening, listening to other people tell their stories. So,
Yeah.
narrative and story, whether it's through reading or discussion, I think is probably the most ways that personally that I've found to develop that kind of cultural competence.
Mm-hmm. That's very helpful. Are those for faculty and staff,
Yes,
for parents? Okay.
this
So that's
is
focused on the
primarily for
faculty
faculty
staff
and
team.
staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have diversity
We do
there.
have if I one of the unusual things about Hope Academy is that twice a year all of our parents are required to come to school on a Saturday with their students.
Wow. Wow.
And um, the first hour and a half or so we meet just as parents with one another.
Hmm.
And we used to sit kind of theater style and hear somebody talk, but now we set up uh, like 45 tables in
Wow.
the
Like
gym,
Harkness and the big
and
round
parents
tables.
sit around the tables, and we foster more discussion between
Mm-hmm.
parents around
Mm-hmm.
given topics, and so yeah, another way of fostering that kind
Yeah.
cultural competency.
Do you try to mix up those tables as far as the amount of time people have been at Hope and kind of give people, who are veterans, as it were, of the
We
community?
should be more thoughtful about that, but yeah, I think the bigger challenge is translation, right?
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we actually yeah, try to have
Because you
somebody
have an
that's
immigrant.
bilingual at each table that can
Yeah.
help with that.
So you're focused on just very fundamentals in that sense of accommodating language
Yeah,
needs.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. One of the things I felt, as you talked about humility, in as one of the requirements, it's also, I think, one of the results of serving in this kind of way. In working at Logos Academy, a similar kind of smaller, much smaller, urban setting, but I felt like some of the families, who had more resources in a material sense, and myself as, as one of the leaders in the school, we were learning some of the ways in which we were impoverished in relation to the, Christian tradition to the liberal arts, Christian liberal arts tradition, and discovering some of the ways in which the families who were in material terms were impoverished actually had wealth and riches, that we didn't. So I'm sure you've had similar experiences. Um, how do you see that dynamic
Yeah.
playing out? In faculty who have served with you, or
Yeah.
or for yourself.
Oh boy, what a beautiful, beautiful idea, beautiful question, Jesse. The one that comes to mind is um, one of the other things that we do to build a deeper connection with our parents
Mm-hmm.
and families is that in October we cancel classes for 3 days,
Mm.
and all of our teachers go out and do a home visit
Wow.
with each
Yeah.
and every family in their class. So
Mm.
from 8 in the morning till 8 at night for 3 days, we go out and visit every family in their home or apartment. And
What a beautiful commitment.
it's it's a life changing thing. Uh, I've been on some of those visits where I've gone with, say, a first grade teacher, and we've pulled up to a big apartment building, and there at the front door was a first grader, and he sees us and he goes, "They're here, they're here!" And he ran out to us, and he grabbed her hand with one hand, and he grabbed mine with the other, and took us into his his apartment and showed us his bedroom, and we started to build a relationship. But here's the thing that you were saying
Wow.
is that uh, many of our families uh, experience and commitment to hospitality
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
so far beyond my
Mm.
understanding of that, and I have learned so much about gospel hospitality from
Yeah.
our families who are and they really are the poorest of the poor in Minneapolis, and
Mm-hmm.
yet one of the things that we have to coach up the teachers is that you have to pace yourself in there because you're gonna because whether you like it or not, if you
They're
come to
gonna
visit
cook.
somebody's home, you can't not eat.
Yeah, they're gonna set a
But you got to
feast.
pace yourself because you've
Yeah.
got maybe six more homes to visit during that day. But
Wow.
oh, the sense of hospitality, the things that we've learned from our families,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is it really been been
Yeah.
life changing.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and that's such a vital, like fundamental part of the, of Homer, say, probably one of the most prominent themes in some of the earliest material, obviously in the Bible, in the Christian, Judeo-Christian scriptures, but in
Yeah,
Homer
maybe
is
maybe
this
another area
sense of
that I've
hospitality,
learned
and
a
I,
lot
I
from
think,
is learning about perseverance in adversity.
mm-hmm,
Right? I
yeah,
mean, the kind of adversity that the poor are wrestling with on a daily basis is
mm-hmm,
for me and for many of
yeah,
our staff unimaginable.
yeah,
And so when we see how they're trusting God and trusting the promises of God in in situations where uh, that uh, encourage us all then to be
yeah,
able to trust God
yeah.
in situations like that.
Yeah, we end up learning from each other in these profound ways. Yeah, and I found it helps really to read the great literature. When you're being chastised, in areas like perseverance and hospitality, because the great literature is very much about these kinds of things as well. That's well, thank you. When you think back on I don't know how much, I won't presume that you remember all that much about the details of the course that you recorded us with us so long ago, but what are some of the top items that you might want to make sure were covered? If you were as you present to school leaders, and you've issued the challenge at the beginning of this conversation to say, we need people to step up and start schools. There's the fields are ripe for the harvest, and this is a critical moment where there's opportunities that might not last, if we miss them. And what are some of the key elements that you would want to say you've got to reflect on, put some time into in studying and preparing? We've touched on a few. I've tried, but I haven't asked you kind of to put your own top, study points on the table, as it were. If you were to kind of think of a short curriculum, or what does Spreading Hope, offer
Yeah.
in that regard?
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes to mind that I brought out in that course is something that I've more recently called Imago Dei education,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or education for image bearers.
Yeah.
And so I think over the years, more and more, I've reflected on what does it mean for education that every single child it bears the mark of God, the image of God. What does it mean in terms of the dignity that goes with that, the responsibility that goes with that, right? And also the future glory that goes with that, and how do those things then deeply impact the kind of education
Yeah.
that we should give to all children. And so, too often, I think I give into what former President Bush calls the soft bigotry of low expectations for inner city youth. It's a powerful phrase, isn't it? That it comes out of a soft bigotry, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
that no one would intentionally do that, but the the idea that there's a suburban standard of education
Right.
and an urban standard
Yeah.
that's far below that is really something that doesn't accord with the Imago Dei.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so constantly I am having to challenge my own self where I'm saying in different ways, this is good enough for them. Ugh.
Yeah.
It even just grieves me to say
Even articulate
that kind
those.
of thing. But
Yeah.
it's an area of repentance that I have to come back to again and again. I often tell the story that right next to Hope Academy is a public park, PV Park, and it is the center of the drug and prostitution activity in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And almost on a monthly basis, a different church or ministry comes to PV and distributes food to neighborhood people. And almost always the same thing is on the menu: hot dogs. And it's not because the poor are enamored of hot dogs, but it's because hot dogs are two things, right? They're cheap
Mm-hmm.
and they're convenient. And so 25 years ago, in starting Hope Academy, I had to ask the question, what kind of education are we going to serve my neighbors here
Mm-hmm.
among the urban poor? And the temptation would be to say, well, I'm going to give them a hot dog education.
Yeah.
And yet what we're called to do is to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And Jesse, in 3 decades, I've never once come across a single parent who wanted a hot dog education for their kids.
Right.
Not once.
Yeah.
Right? They all
Yeah.
want a steak education.
Right.
And so the question is, how do we give the best education there is to those who need it the most? And it requires me to reckon with the Imago Dei in each child. Again, going back to C.S. Lewis, remember
Hmm.
he said, "You've never met an ordinary person,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that in the age to come, the most ordinary person will have a kind of glory that you will be tempted to fall down and worship."
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. He he puts that so starkly.
Reckoning with the Imago Dei in every person is something that I think is absolutely critical. Otherwise, what we will do is we will trivialize the Imago Dei in each child and give them uh, an education that's not worthy of the children of God.
Yeah, amen. That is, I love the fact that you refer to, a kind of continual repentance that calls forth from us, and just the how deeply ingrained some of those assumptions are, so that even, well-meaning churches in your neighborhood just keep falling into the same hot dog trap, and we do in our minds keep being okay with this compromise or that compromise, um, you know,
Yeah,
and
maybe
so.
another thing that I would bring up that we talked about in the course was the beauty of this. I call it the secret sauce of working in communities that are facing more significant challenges in the
Hmm.
education of their children. And the secret sauce is a helpful diagnostic I've found when there's academic failure in a situation, that usually one of these three elements is either not present or is malfunctioning. And the three elements are, the first one is what we've just talked about, is high expectations
Yeah. Yeah.
for everybody, right? That to believe the best about that they will be able to do the best. And I mean, even the uh, it there may be differences in capacity,
Hmm.
but in terms of what we fill those jars with, is still the same great great thing that we fill in every jar.
Yeah.
So high expectations. The second thing is high accountability,
Hmm.
and this is probably the most difficult thing that our Spreading Hope schools do on a day-to-day basis. I think in our day, more and more, accountability is seen as a dirty word, as
Hmm.
something to run from. But we all know that the most successful people in the world invite accountability into their lives, and so that's a
Hmm.
that's a big challenge. Is to help parents and students to see that accountability is our friend.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something we
We
should
should
welcome. It's something
seek
that we
out.
all need.
Yeah.
And so not to resent or resist it, but to welcome
Yeah.
accountability. And so, like, for instance, with our parent community, in most poor neighborhoods, only 15% of parents will attend their child's parent teacher conference. But
Hmm.
at Hope Academy, it's 97% on the
Wow.
day of, and the other 3% get it done afterwards. Now, it's the same group of parents. What's different? Well, what's different is that we learn the same thing that the cell phone companies know, is that if you don't pay your bill, right, you turn off
Shut it
the
off.
service. And
Yeah.
we've said, if you don't make up your conference within a week, if you missed it, you should keep your child at home until you do get it scheduled.
Wow.
Boy.
Hmm.
Now that's
Yeah.
accountability,
Yep.
right? That changes things, and parents will say, "Well, can I get that scheduled today?" Right? And
Hmm.
so high expectations, high accountability, and then the third one is high support.
Hmm.
Right? It's not just enough to say, "Well, we're raising the bar and we're going to hold you accountable to it," but not come alongside you to provide the extra supports to help you
Hmm.
to get to that. right? So it might mean what we have is before school every morning an academic support center.
Mm-hmm.
So to come alongside, right,
Yeah.
students to provide extra support to be able to do things. And usually again when there's some kind of failure either among students or parents, one of those three is not functioning
Mm-hmm.
properly, because when all three are working, you get magic. You
Mm-hmm.
get magic.
That's the magic
You
sauce.
really do see people rise
Mm-hmm.
to meet those higher
Mm-hmm.
expectations in a beautiful, beautiful way.
Mm.
And
What?
maybe just one last thing, that
Yeah.
that the key to making those those three things work is
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Is that that old phrase, nobody cares how much you know until they first know how much you care.
Right. Yeah.
And so the ability to lean in and build authentic relationships with
Mm-hmm.
students and with families, so that they know how deeply you love and care for them is
Mm-hmm.
essential in order
Yeah.
to then employ the the secret sauce.
Yeah. That's powerful. Um, what I would imagine the accountability probably hits in multiple sectors. What are a few other examples, like students, parents, faculty? Can you give accountability examples in some of those different categories? The
Yes.
one, yeah.
Yeah. So, for instance, among students in our upper school, if you're on academic probation, you're going to be asked to attend that academic support center for at least 4 mornings a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you miss those, then we ask you to come on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's
Mm-hmm. So you're giving up
you can see
your personal
how
time as a
it's
young
not just
person
painful for them; it's painful for us to have to come on Saturday to make up,
to
right?
cover those. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then if you're on academic probation and you've missed an important assignment, we ask you not to go home on the bus at the end of the day. Instead, to go to the office and make a call home. Say, Mom, I
Mm-hmm.
have an important assignment that I didn't get done. I'm gonna have to stay after school today to
And I
get
need a
that finished.
separate ride.
Could you pick me up at 5:45 tonight?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So direct
that's
accountability with their parents, as well as the, making it up, getting it done right
yeah,
then.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then accountability in terms of teaching, right? Is how do we hold ourselves accountable for bringing our best work in the classroom, and that requires humility to realize I need to grow.
Yeah.
It requires right coaching, right, to invite coaching
Yeah.
and feedback, right, and then accountability about actually improving and growing
Mm-hmm.
as a teacher. So that's again when we say humble, hungry, smart as
Mm-hmm.
the key elements of a teacher that we're looking for. One of those is how open and inviting am I to getting better
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to coaching. Because we just don't assume, particularly if we're coming from a non-classical background, there's a lot of areas to grow there. And this would be some where ClassicalU, right,
Mm-hmm.
is able to provide help to teachers
Mm-hmm.
and support to teachers to grow in our craft as
Pointing
teachers. Yeah.
to some of those ways in which growth is always going to be needed. Well, thank you. I'd have just one more question. You're representing Spreading Hope network, and but I'd ask, what are some other organizations, partners that you've found over the years that you would lift up and kind of commend to folks listening who are feeling their hearts moved where should people reach out? What kind of help can they find, or models, examples?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, if say somebody was teaching or leading in a classical Christian school and was moved by this move of God to bring this beautiful thing to those who need it the most, I would encourage them to go to the spreadinghopenetwork.org website and to see the kinds of help there. There's really a 3-stage process that we encourage people to go through. The first is to have an immersive experience in learning about Hope Academy, and we do that by hosting a quarterly, we call it a plunge event, where you come for 2 days,
literally
and
immersing,
get immersed in uh, in the Hope Academy model. The second stage is then getting equipped to lead a school and launch a school, and then the third phase is the actual launching of the school. We've developed a playbook based on all of the things over the last 25 years that we've learned about essentially of planting a school in an under-resourced community. And so there's this community of other leaders who have done this. And so that's a really supportive community that meets virtually once a month.
Wow.
To
That's substantial.
encourage and help one another. We called it the Vanguard Fellowship. So we know we're leading a kind of revolution of sorts, and but the value of connecting with each other and helping each other problem solve and encourage one another in this work. I think of course the Society for Classical Learning is another place that is renewing a vision to grow the movement, and they have started something called the Generations Fund to raise capital to help plant new classical Christian schools all over the country, and so the Society for Classical Learning it has been a great resource of them. I mentioned your work, ClassicalU, where people can take courses and there's publications and curriculum to help in this.
Yeah, with Classical Academic Press or our parent company.
Amazing resource in helping that. Classical Commons is kind of a new thing that's trying to resource the pipeline of talent that these schools will all need in terms of teachers, recruiting teachers and leaders to do that. They would be another important one.
Good. Thank you so much. Your time was it was just delightful to catch up with you a little bit, to hear your heart and your love for the work that you've done all these years, and the work that Spreading Hope is continuing to enable and encourage. We'll definitely have a link, spreadinghopenetwork.org, in the show notes here for the episode. And anything else that you'd want to say, or maybe you could offer a prayer in closing for us, for those listening.
I'd love to do that.
Thank you.
I'd love to do that. Lord, this is a movement of your Spirit. And Lord, it's been the greatest source of joy and fulfillment and delight is getting on board with something that you're doing to bless the nations. And so I pray that you would continue to pour out your Spirit on this movement of bringing the best education there is to those children in our cities who need it the most. We ask it for your glory and for our good. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks so much, Russ.
Thanks, Jesse. God bless.
You've been listening to the ClassicalU podcast. Thank you for tuning in and for following us with our courses, training teachers, parents, school leaders on ClassicalU.com. Our training platform is owned and operated by Classical Academic Press. As listeners, you can purchase any book from Classical Academic Press outside of our digital items, as well as any ClassicalU subscription at our special listener discount of 10% off. Just enter the code CU Podcast, all one word, at the point of purchase to receive this discount on any book or ClassicalU.com subscription. Finally, please also watch for live learning webinars in collaboration with Scholia Academy, which offers live online courses for primary and secondary students. Thank you for listening.